Okay, I'm going to introduce a concept to you today. It's not really a concept. It's a mindset and something that I recently saw Simon Sinek put out. Simon had lifted it from the Navy SEALs. And it's all about building a team and building bonds in a team. And so what we've got is we've got performance on this side and trust on this side. And this is the key to relationships, and this is the key to building high-performing organizations. On this axis, right, high performance, low trust. On this axis, low performance, high trust, right? So the further on we go down, the value goes up. The ideal performer, obviously, is high performance, high trust. That's the winner. Now, having said that, we've all been in organizations before where we've had a very, very high performer, but what they've had amongst their team is incredibly low trust, right? Because my trust grid goes up as I go down this way. When we build our team here at TMG, there's a number of things that we really identify during the interview process. There's no ideal way to identify if somebody's a high performer, high trust in the interview process, but you can look for analogs around that. And on the high performance side, you can look for awards, you can look for tech experience, you can look for accomplishments. But oftentimes what is not examined in the interview process that is critical to later when the person joins the team is how do I at least get somebody who falls into this general area in the trust continuum between the two. The person I would take all day long is a high trust, mid to low performer, all day long. Because I can train for performance. If somebody comes into my organization and their performance relative to what we need to have done is low, I can augment that with training. What is very difficult to augment is trust. So I make sure that in my interview process, I want somebody to fall in the trust area right around here. Now, how do we do that? And why is that important? Because you can get somebody down here. You can absolutely get somebody who's a high performer, low trust. And I'm going to tell you something. I've had them in my organization before. And what you've got to determine is, are they carrying over future behaviors from a previous environment? There are individuals who came from maybe a contracting environment where they didn't have to worry about teammates that much because they were 30 days, 60 days, 90 days together, and all that mattered was the performance. And trust was less of a desirable characteristic. But if you're going to build an organization for the long term, you might get somebody in an organization in your interview process that you've got to determine, are they a low trust because it's innate in who they are as a person, or are they carrying over those behaviors from a previous environment? Because then what you can do is help them define what trust means in the new environment. Trust means doing, saying, and delivering on what you're going to do. So you can get a high performer, potentially, and move them through conversation, through coaching, through training, along that continuum and bring them out to the ideal performer. Conversely, you can get somebody who's incredibly high trust. Now, I'm not going to recommend you hire somebody down here. I use this as an example. What I am going to do, though, is you want to hire somebody in this part of the grid. It's very difficult to tell in an interview process if they really are this high on the trust factor. But if you can, through Q&A, question and answer within the interview process, and things that happen in the interview process, examples, do they get here 10 minutes early before they were supposed to be here? Do they return work that you've asked them in the interview process to you in a timely fashion? Do they follow up appropriately? Those are all analogs and behaviors that give some insight as to they're doing what they say they're going to do. So and through reference checks, you can check on trust also, because that is historical legacy data that somebody can't fake trust in reference checks. Now you want to get them in here. in the interview process. And then what you want to move is in the interview process, once they're in here and you know they're in this general area and at least you interviewed for mid-range on skills, then it's up to your organization to train them and communicate with them to move them up into the high performer, high trust environment. And that high trust, high performer environment is critical. All the teams I've developed over the years, I've developed sales organizations, I've developed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world-class competitive teams, I've developed fight teams, I've developed production companies, I've developed search firms. And the critical component, day after day, week after week, year after year, is the individual who's mid-trust to mid to high performer along this grid when you hire them. And the worst person in your organization is the person who you bring in as a high performer, or they're a high performer, yet the collateral damage that they bring to the organization because nobody can trust them can absolutely erode esprit de corps in the organization. So wrapping up, ideal individual, the gimme, high performance, high trust. Your responsibility as a leader is to get people, at least in the interview process, where they fall into this grid. And then you decide is, are you going to commit to taking a perceived low trust performer and moving them along this line here on a steady basis with identifying what trust means in your environment? And then on the flip side here, if they run along here, high on the trust continuum, what are you going to do in order to augment them with their technical skills so they can become a high-end performer? So there you go. Shout out again, Sinek, Simon Sinek, has recently brought this out in his Infinite versus the Finite game, and he borrowed that from the Navy SEALs organization, and the Navy SEALs would always say, give me a high trust mid-performer versus a high performer with low trust. Do you have my 6? Do you have my 9? And you need to be looking and thinking about that all the time as you build your company.